So, thank you very much for coming today to this webinar, From Judgment to Joy, where I'm going to share the insights that help me heal from body shame, insecurities, and obsession. So, for most of my life, I struggled with body image and it really got me down. And around 6 years ago, I recovered from that and it doesn't bother me anymore, and I feel really free of it. And I now want to share that with other people. And so you can have your own freedom if that's not something that you're currently experiencing. So, first of all, I'm going to talk about where I think the suffering comes from, because how we understand that will inform how we deal with it. And the suffering can take different forms, different thought patterns, different behaviors. But I want to look at the ideas that I think are really at the root of it. And because the more we understand it, the easier it is to heal from it. And I'm also going to look at why those ideas look true. And then I'm going to talk about how we heal and how we have a nicer experience of our appearance and our body, and how we come to see that those ideas that were causing us so much suffering aren't true. Okay, so before we start, I'd really encourage you, if this is a problem that you're struggling with, to relax and just kind of see this like a bedtime story. Just some time for you to just get cozy, get comfortable, not worry about anything. Because often when we're trying to get over a problem, our minds are really, really busy and then we can't see anything new. And if you're struggling with your appearance, then that's what you need. You need something fresh. So relaxing is kind of the state that is most conducive to you seeing something fresh. So you don't have to worry about anything. I'm really worried about everything. So I'll do that for you and just take some time for yourself. So, okay, I'm going to start off with talking about the suffering. So where does the problem come from? Because the severity varies, but it's incredibly common. If you speak to people about their appearance and their bodies, most people are not going to say, great, you know, no worries. And so how do we get into this position where that's so common? I think it's quite bizarre. And I think that there are two fundamental ideas at the root of it. They might not be what starts it, but they are certainly what keeps it going. And those two ideas are, firstly, that there is a right way to look and there's a wrong way to look, and that some ways of looking are better than others. And we just take this for granted because we hear about that all our life. And it just seems like an objective truth. And then the second idea is, because that is just like a kind of clinical fact. But why does anybody care? Because we have associations with, if you look the right way, it means something. There's an implication about your value, how lovable you are, how likable you are, how popular you might be, whether you deserve respect, whether you'll get attention, whether you'll get intimacy, connection with other people. Some people even think it will affect, whether you'll get a job that you like. There's a lot riding on it. And, if we believe that we can't get things that we want in life because of how we look, and we think that we can't be happy as a result, it can turn into a huge problem. So many people will really argue with what I'm saying. They'll say, no, 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 there is a right way to look. And that I don't think that that's true. So I used to think that for most of my life, that some people look better than others. And when I change my body in certain ways, I look better. And I don't feel that way anymore. So I don't see any hierarchy really with how anyone looks anymore. And you can see this in young children. Like, I have a 5-year-old daughter, and she doesn't watch TV yet, apart from at school sometimes. She's obviously not on social media, and she's not getting these messages that there's a right way and a wrong way to look from me. And I can just see that there's an absence of this whole idea. Like, she It's just not on her mind. It's not a thing. It hasn't occurred to her. It's not an innate part of our design. We're not born with it. Babies don't have it. But because the messages start so early, and some of them are quite subtle, some of them are not, but some of them are quite subtle, it just seems like it's true because it gets reinforced all the time. And if you look for evidence to say that this is true or it isn't true, you will find it. So, for example, you probably know lots of people who you think are conventionally attractive, so they kind of conform with the beauty standards. And maybe they're not happy, right? So, and the converse, the opposite is also true. You'll have people who you don't think conform with the standards, who you think are ugly or unattractive, and they're happy and they have everything they want in life and they have a happy relationship. So there's no direct link, but it appears that there is, or that's certainly how it appeared to me. And another way you can sort of see this is that people who conform will have, with the standards, let's say, will have a really different experience. So what I mean is you can have two people that conform with the standards and one can think they're beautiful and one doesn't. And what's the difference? It's the way they think about themselves. And that's what we actually experience, is we experience our own thoughts, whether they're conscious or below our conscious awareness, about how we look. So our experience of our bodies and the way we look can't possibly come from our bodies, right? Because our bodies are like flesh and matter. They have to come from what we think and how we feel about them. But that's not visible to us. So when we look in the mirror, we don't see our thoughts and we don't realize that they're informing our perception. So what do we actually believe? I said there's a right way and a wrong way to look, a better way and a worse way. And these are kind of known as the beauty standards. A lot of people talk about them, which is all the rules about how we're meant to look. And I'm just going to go through some of them. You're going to be aware of them because we come across them all the time. But typically, we're told that it's more attractive to be able-bodied, to be healthy, youthful, to look young is more attractive than to look older, to have smooth skin, no blemishes, rashes, spots, discoloration. And then skin color is obviously can be a massive thing. In some places, the darker your skin, the less attractive and even the less valuable you're considered. But also, in other cultures and places, the paler you are, that can be considered unattractive. And it can lead to these horrible things that are dangerous for us, like bleaching our skin or tanning, getting skin cancer from doing that. Another thing is symmetry. And a massive thing for me was size. So this can vary a bit, but the dominant one is not to be fat. Basically, not to have more fats on your body. That's uglier and that's less attractive. But I do know quite a few people, now I'm working in this area, who struggle with the opposite and they get told they don't have enough fat on their body. So it can work both ways. So those are kind of the generic things. And then for women, the breast size can vary, according to different people, but they shouldn't sag. So that's important. And hair, you should have hair, lots, plenty of hair on your head, but not in other places. Then for men, they should be a certain height and muscular. A lot of people idealize having a six pack. So those are the standards for men and women. And typically they originate in distinguishing characteristics. So things that, a woman has versus what a man has. And then they get exaggerated because it's kind of like this addiction to more. Like if you have a small waist, then it's better to have a smaller waist. So let's take out some of your ribs for that. Or for a man to be muscular, then more is better. And that can lead to obsessive kind of bodybuilding and stuff like that. So the upshot is the more you conform with all these rules, the more attractive you're considered to be. And then there's all those implications of the things that you'll get and the treatment that you'll receive. And if you don't, well, essentially we've set it up so that your natural body, especially as it goes through life and changes, is inadequate, not good enough, and ugly, which is kind of crazy that that is the society we live in. And a lot of us, especially me, don't question that really. We just, because I wanted to be loved, respected, liked, I didn't really care whether I didn't care about anything else, right? So if I thought that that's what is going to get me everything that I want, then that's what I'm interested in. And so it's really powerful because our emotions are really tied up in it, and so we get kind of taken in. So I just want to sort of talk about, clarify a little bit, because it can be a bit confusing between objectivity and subjectivity. So it sounds a bit dry, but it's quite important. So there are objective standards, right? So I can measure my height, I can measure my waist, I can measure, these days we're encouraged to measure everything, muscle mass, things like that. That is objective. And then we can have a judgment about that, which is subjective. And so some people talk about pretty privilege. So they say, if you conform with the standards, you will get treated better. And I think there's definitely a grain of truth to that in certain scenarios. Like if I applied for a job as a model, I'm probably not going to get it. If I go into a bar, maybe fewer people will chat me up than someone else, or vice versa. So there is a truth of that because we're all subject to this conditioning. So of course it's going to impact how people view. You know, if you're online dating, whether you're going to swipe a particular way is impacted by all of this. But I think when it can feel all consuming, or it did for me, when I internalized those standards. Because when you internalize them and really feel that you are less valuable and you are less attractive because of the ways in which you don't conform, then it's very difficult to experience something outside of that. It's hard to believe that somebody else might think differently about it. And it's hard to notice when people do. Like some people are in very loving relationships, people who would say they have body dysmorphia or struggle with body image. They're in very loving relationships. They get a lot of compliments about the way they look, but they don't feel any of it because that's not the way they see it. And so they can't really relate to and contemplate that that's real, and it doesn't do anything for them. And the opposite is also true, that now I'm much less impacted by what other people think of the way I look. So if someone has a negative judgment about my appearance, I take that less seriously because I don't buy into any of that, basically. So there is such a thing as discrimination on the basis of how someone looks. Different things do happen in certain circumstances, but those differences aren't really, they're not going to make the difference between a happy life and an unhappy life, basically. And but some people, I mean, the people here, I don't know what you think about this because we're all coming at it from different places, but some people really do believe that because of the way they look, you know, their life chances are just lower and they just can't be happy. And it's a real trap. And I used to feel trapped. I used to feel, because I developed an eating disorder, because of this, I felt that I just can't have what I want in life because I like eating, but then that makes me ugly. And so it was really depressing, and I was kind of stuck in that way of thinking, and it was all held in place because of these beliefs. when these beliefs faded away, my eating disorder just faded away as well. But why do these ideas look true? You know, we've got all these rules. Why do we feel them in our bodies to be true? Like, why do we take so much notice of them? Because I don't know what you think when I'm talking now, but they can sound quite ridiculous to me when they're kind of in black and white. Like, this has got to be this shape, this has got to be this size. It's all like a mathematical equation. But I got sucked into this. So I'm just going to talk about why. So we get messages to reinforce these ideas throughout our life. And you could call that cultural conditioning, indoctrination, or brainwashing. And it's not necessarily, you see, that sounds like there's some group of men in a room going, ha ha ha, ha, plotting. But it's not exactly like that. I mean, there's an element to that because if you want to sell something, you know, just aging, just make some money. There's a lot of money to be made. So there is that going on as well. But more broadly, we all buy into it and then we pass it on, often without realizing it or not intentionally. So, for example, so it can be very kind of brutal and your parents telling you that you're ugly and the way you look is unattractive. It could be malicious. You could be getting bullied at school saying, you know, the shape of your nose or you're fat or whatever. And the way that works, I mean, it's very simple, but people tell you that and you believe it. That's essentially how it happens, especially, you know, if it's a group of people. As children, we're quite gullible for the people around us. And if people say to us, you know, you're ugly or you're fat or whatever, or they call us names, we take that on and we feel it. And as we get older and cleverer, those feelings and that self-perception doesn't always really go away, even though we, you know, can pass exams and learn to drive and, you know, lead an adult life. We have those kind of we still have those childlike feelings about ourselves. So there can be the nastiness, the bullying, and that was probably just started to, you know, maybe make someone feel better about themselves by trying to get attention, by getting people to laugh at them. They're just looking for weaknesses. But it can also just be really well-meaning. So if you buy into these standards 100% and you think they're going to affect your child's life chances, you may think it's kind to pass on this information, like you need to do something about, you know, your face or your size, or you need to go on a diet or whatever. You know, it's almost like if you think people are going to go to hell if they haven't been baptized, you might go around and tell everyone because you genuinely think they're going to hell, poor people, and they don't even know it. So it's well-meaning, you know, because that's what you believe. The impact on people might be quite devastating, but it's well-meaning. I don't know about you, but when people say things with conviction, I'm often more likely to think it's true. And people talk about this area with such conviction. Like, for example, cellulite. I heard someone the other day saying, no one can ever tell me that cellulite isn't ugly. They just can't, right? So there's a lot of conviction in that. And the way they're saying that is just like, oh, okay then, right, okay. Well, that's certainly how I was influenced anyway. And then another way through is through the media, and can be more subtle. So when I was a child, I used to watch like Disney and stuff like that. And you can see the way that the characters that you're supposed to like, the main characters, the interesting characters, the characters that fall in love, the way their bodies are, you know, the proportions and everything, you start to make associations in your mind. Oh, so that is what's beautiful. That's what's important. uh, that's what gets attention. That's and it's working at a subtle level, and it's starting really early. Then the other thing, what I might hear is overhearing conversations. So especially of women saying they need to lose 5 pounds, or oh, they're so happy they've lost 5 pounds, or somebody thought I looked older than I am. You know, that's how you're getting the message that that's a bad thing. I mean, that's a huge thing that people think it's bad to look older than you are. I mean, why? Why does that matter at all? So it's overhearing a lot. I think that can probably one of the most powerful ways, especially if it's people you look up to, especially if it's people you hang around with a lot who influence you. I mean, even just makeup. Like, let's say, your mum takes ages to get ready before she'll go anywhere, or she always has to be wearing makeup. And, you get a message from that. I'm not saying it's wrong to wear makeup. This can be fine, it can be fun. But if it's like an obligation, what's the message? The message is that you're not good enough without that. Another powerful way we get the message is through humor, and a lot of this kind of self-deprecating humor. That is very common, especially even in women who will call themselves feminists or whatever, and men these days too, to be fair, is they'll put down the ways in which their body doesn't conform, and they will apologize for their bodies. So you're hearing that, and it's going in, okay, so this means that, this means that it's bad, because it's just getting corroborated from every single angle. And then once you have those beliefs, you do also tend to dismiss anything that invalidates them, or you don't focus on that. Or that's the way it was for me. So, like what I said earlier, I could see someone who I didn't think was attractive, and they were really happy, but that didn't interest me because it just didn't feel real to me. It was just so outside of, the whole belief system that I built up. And so these are kind of the generic cultural conditioning. But I think also things can happen in our personal lives that can make us more susceptible to it. And you could call these trauma. And when I'm talking about trauma, I don't mean in any objective sense. I'm talking about uh, things that happen to us that we find scary and we find traumatic. And I mean, I had, compared with a lot of people, a relatively untraumatic childhood. But I did have a dad who I was afraid of. He had a temper, and it was very unpredictable. And I was always on edge, and I was always tense because I just didn't know what was going to make him blow up, essentially. And, that comes with really powerful feelings. So I think as children, we take everything personally, and we think that it's our fault or it's something to do with us. And we don't see it's like what's going on for that person, and we just happen to be there. And what happened for me, because I can remember a time before that was really impacting me, when I felt lighter and freer, and I would dance, and I didn't have eating problems. This is when I was very young. And then at a certain point, that all changed, and I was very tense and I was very on edge. And that's when I started eating more to try and calm myself down, because I found that helped me to kind of uh, soothe myself, essentially, and comfort myself, because I was just feeling so uptight and worried all the time. And it's hard to bear that. So most of us are going to turn to something or other to try and get away from those feelings, especially if we don't see those feelings for what they are and we don't understand the context. We just have this horrible sense that we're not safe. We don't know how to get safe. There's something wrong with us. We don't know what it is. So it's hard to just stay with that. Like, we don't tend to do that. We tend to develop dysfunctional behaviors or coping mechanisms. You can call them dysfunctional, but they kind of help, and that's why we keep doing them. So I think, and this is just my sort of theory, but I feel like when we go through those situations, so we go up into our head because we don't like those feelings and we're trying to figure out, how am I going to get out of this situation? What's the plan? What's causing this? How can I fix it? And then if you have this conditioning coming in about the beauty standards, it's like bingo. Or this is how it was for me anyway. That's the answer. Because all the associations with beautiful was so being beautiful was so wonderful. You know, you have them like in the music videos, in the Hollywood movies. It's like it's representing this feeling. It's like a holiday ad, you know, of floating, and we want those feelings, and they're associated with looking a certain way, or that's how it's presented. And for me, it was like escapism. Like when I would go on a diet to try to change my body, it was like hope of a promised land, you know, like hope of a better feeling. And when I achieved that, there was such a high, but it wasn't a happiness, because it obviously came with a lot of fear, because it was all about control. It was nothing to do with being me. It was all very superficial. But yeah, so it's like this kind of escapism. I just wanted to say briefly about trauma, because a lot of times when I hear people talking about that, it can be quite depressing, because it's kind of represented as a, like a sentence, like, oh, this happened to you. Now you've got this diagnosis and you're stuck with it, because that's what happens when people go through these things. And I really don't see it like that at all. I think we can heal from everything, and everybody has that capacity to have a fresh perspective and a nicer experience of life. And obviously, I don't wish those kind of incidents upon anyone. But for me, it's very reassuring to know that they are not what is going to determine my experience of life. That we're not defined by the things that happen to us, and we always have the opportunity to have a fresh experience. And that's because our experience is coming from within us. So it's not what happened to us, but what we think that means about us now, and what it and this is sometimes diagnoses can be unhelpful, I think, in this area. So they can be hugely helpful. So if you've got a diagnosis, like let's say you've got body dysmorphia disorder, and you find that helpful, then that's great. I remember when I first went to 12-step meetings, Overeaters Anonymous, because of my problems with eating, I did feel relief that there were other people who had these problems. And that's a really great thing, because often when we're suffering, we feel like there's something wrong with us and we're so different. And the truth is that it's universal, whether it's this problem or another problem. It's part of life to suffer. And that can, we don't want to know that we don't want other people to be suffering, of course, right? But sometimes it's good to know, oh, it's not just because there's something wrong with me. This is something that happens in life, as part of life. I also think there's the opportunity to suffer less as we come to understand life better. But I don't think there's really the possibility not to feel sad or not to feel angry or things like that. And the other thing that having a diagnosis can give you is it can give you access to support. And so that's very practical, and that can be really helpful, because, you know, if you're suffering, then you need support of whatever kind. And if that diagnosis gives you that, then that's really helpful. Where it can get unhelpful is when you start to identify with the diagnosis, and then you say, people like me can't, you know, we can't be happy, we can't do this, we can't do that. That may well be your reality now. So it's not about denying what's going on, but, you know, we can't predict the future. So to say things like that is just misleading. We don't know what will happen to us in the future. And diagnoses are really generalizations. They're if you look at things like body dysmorphia disorder, it's so varied in the kind of behaviors. You can have people who are constantly posting selfies of themselves to get approval, and you have people who won't leave the house because they don't want anyone to see them. So I think it's helpful to look at what is the root, what do we have in common, and it's all about these beliefs that there's a right way to look and a wrong way, and we don't measure up, and that means we can't be happy. And you could say more broadly than that, all kind of suffering is to do with having negative, unhelpful thinking about ourselves and about life that we take seriously. So you might think, yeah, yeah. But I look in the mirror and I just look ugly. And that's just what I think, and it's how I feel, and it's just talking. I know that this is helping. I hope that's not the case, but um, so we can't exaggerate the impact of what's going on within us, of our thoughts and our beliefs on what we see and how we see it. So we are not seeing an objective reality. When we look at a photo of ourselves and like, oh, there is judgment, invisible judgment, and that is creating that reaction. And when that judgment goes away, it's not a problem. And the other thing that happens, but I'll come on to that. So a lot of people, like somebody said to me just the other day, you're really good at lying to yourself. I can't pretend. Like I look in the mirror, I know I'm ugly, I can see. But what we can't see is the judgment, because we've been indoctrinated our whole life with these judgments, subtly, overtly, every day, from the cradle to the grave. But it will be. You won't even notice it. You'll pass a billboard, just everywhere, comments, this, that, this. I mean, go on the internet, which you don't go on the internet, but it's just going to be, you could call it propaganda, or it's just messages, right? It's these messages that are reinforcing it. And they stand between you and your perception of what you look like. But someone who doesn't have those judgments, like me now, I don't see, anyone as looking ugly. Now, I might have judgments come up, like if I look in the mirror, I can have a legacy of that conditioning where it will be like a critical thought. But I don't take it seriously, so it doesn't really affect my life very much. But it's hard to imagine that. Or it was hard for me to imagine that when I just saw myself as ugly and felt disgusting and felt despair. It just looks objective, but it isn't. So one thing I would encourage you to do is to question everything. So if you're miserable, if you're fine, if you're happy, it doesn't matter. You can just keep going along with it. But if you're miserable, just question everything. So when we feel awful, when we look in the mirror, we see the photo we don't like of ourselves, we can't stand it. So the logical thing for most people is to try and change how they look if they possibly can. And so in my case, I restricted what I ate, and I weighed myself obsessively, and I monitored everything obsessively, and then I started exercising in a very regimented way, and I had lots of rules about everything, and And then I couldn't keep to all of that because it was a huge pressure. And so, I developed these eating disorders, and then I thought that was the problem. So for a long time, I just thought I'm just greedy. Or why can't I stop eating? And I had no sense that it was because of these body image, or that it was to do with that at all, or even that it was to do with unhappiness. Because now I'm happy, I don't want to eat a whole pack of biscuits. Like that's just not what we do when we're happy, you know? And so that's kind of the way it manifested for me. But other people will get into cosmetic surgery or like Botox or maybe makeup, spend ages doing that before they'll leave the house. And other people are posting photos of themselves and trying to get positive feedback all the time because it's almost like they don't know. They think that there's an opinion out there of how attractive they are. A lot of people think this. And they're like, will you just be honest with me? And it's a red herring and a dead end because there is no objective. It's all subjective, you know. So there's all these different behaviors that we can get into. And often our system of sort of trying to help people with this is very much focused on behaviors. So, you don't eat enough. Okay, you need to eat more. Here's this plan. And it doesn't really help. It- sometimes it's essential, obviously, but for me, even when I was kind of like managing and I was at a normal weight and I was, exercising regularly and I was just miserable. And I think that's important. Now, that might not show up on a kind of diagnosis if you're just focusing on the behaviors. But, if you want people to really be happy and enjoy their lives, then I think we have to go a bit deeper than just looking at the behaviors and trying to change the behaviors, because also the behaviors make sense because of your beliefs. When your beliefs change, your behaviors change, and it's much easier, and you're not trying to fight yourself all the time. Like, a lot of people say recovery is such hard work, and that's not my experience at all. When you see differently, different things make sense. So I'm just going to go on to healing now. Okay, so spoken about the problem, how I think it originates. And now I want to talk about how do we free ourselves from that? Because it took me so long. So I kind of hope it's not going to take other people so long. So this talk I've said is about insights. And that I think is really crucial. People want a 10-step plan. They want a technique, what to do. And I totally get it because I'm still like that now. It's still my instinct because of our culture. Our culture is all about thinking and doing, and that's where we look for the solutions. But this problem comes from our thinking, right? And we can't solve it from that same kind of quality of thinking. And the other thing is, so people tend to want to stop the behavior. So let's say I compare myself with other people all the time and I feel inferior. How do I stop that? And I look in the mirror and I feel dreadful. How can I feel better? So those are really great questions. We want that for ourselves. But we have to look at what's the root of it. And it's these beliefs that we identify with. And how can we realize that they're not true, and not just intellectually, but at a deep level that we feel in our body? It's like we relax. That's what's going to make a difference. And a lot of people want to feel beautiful, right? If they feel ugly and they feel unattractive, what they really want is to feel beautiful. And lots of people say that to me. And my experience of that hasn't been that's kind of the important thing in my recovery. It's not now like I look at myself and think, wow, Uh, because I think that's something that we get from our culture as well, that there's almost like this the idea that happiness comes from feeling that we look a certain way, or that we look better than other people, or not worse than other people. And happiness for me is really different from that. It's it's knowing that I'm a part of life and life is beautiful. So I'm beautiful because I'm a part of life. There aren't all the conditions around. I'm beautiful because I don't look that bad. I don't look that fat. I don't look that old. You see, this is the paradigm we're in, that we compare ourselves to these standards. And so it's a lot of people are like, oh no, you look fine, you don't look so. It's it's still the same paradigm. And what I'm talking about as freedom is much, much more radical than that. It's just beyond all judgment. And then people say, oh, so your looks aren't important to you then. And I feel like that misses the point, because it sounds like there's this thing called looks. And because I can't win at that game, I'm going to pretend I don't care about it. But what I'm talking about is something different. I love looking at people. I enjoy it, but I don't have conditions around that enjoyment. So in fact, you could say I enjoy looks a lot more. So if I think about my husband, we've been together for 20 years. And in that time, he's changed. His looks have changed a little bit. And he always looks fantastic. He does, effortlessly, because when I see his physical form, that's how I know where he is, like my darling, you know? So you can really enjoy looks, and you can enjoy them fully, and you can be really strongly attracted to someone without judgments, and it's a much more enjoyable experience. And without all the hierarchy, you just see beauty everywhere, which is really nice. And there's no insecurity, because you just know you're a part of life. How do we change these beliefs? Because some people try to change them, like, I think fat is ugly. Okay, I'm going to try and change that to say, I think fat is beautiful. I'm going to look in the mirror and I'm going to keep saying it to myself. Now, for me, that's really tiring, and it didn't really help. So what helped, I've come up with these like 3 qualities that I think help beliefs to change. Like, we don't change them through willpower, or that's not my experience. We don't get in there and just rewrite them. Some people can do that, and if you find that beneficial, then just do that, obviously. But if that's not working for you, I would encourage you to see if you can nurture these kind of qualities. So the first one is humility. So if you're suffering with negative thinking about how you look, what do you need? You need a fresh perspective. And to have a fresh perspective, you have to be open to the fact that you might not be seeing everything that you could see. And that does require humility. I love this phrase from the Quakers: think it possible that you may be mistaken. I love the understatement of that, um, because it's gentle. And I think that's what we need. We need gentleness with this. It just can't, you're not going to change through like force, push, pressure. Nothing new can get in like that, because you're just stuffing your head full of more thinking. So skepticism is fine, right? So if I say to you, I've got 3 steps, they're going to take 5 minutes, give me £10,000 and you're not going to have this problem, it's healthy to have some skepticism around that, right? But when it turns into cynicism, it does nothing for you. So cynicism is like, nothing can help me, and I know that, and that's just the way it is, because nothing has helped me so far. And so you just completely shut down, and no light can get in, and nothing new can get in. And that's sort of bringing me to the second quality, which is about curiosity. So can you have an open mind? So rather than saying, cellulite is beautiful, cellulite is beautiful, cellulite is beautiful, can you just be like open to question like, it's interesting that I find that so repugnant? Or is it possible that I could see that another way? And curiosity means you don't know the answer. So you have to hang out in not knowing, and don't try and come up with the answer. Just hang out in the not knowing. And then, so what, there is stuff that gets in the way of curiosity, right? And one thing is freaking out. So if we're like, oh my God, this is awful, this shouldn't be happening, I'm never going to get over this, I've got this terrible condition, it's so unfair, there's no room for curiosity. So I would encourage you, if you can, to see it differently, because when we have these problems, we kind of see them like they shouldn't be happening. I mean, that's kind of my default. Like, I don't like this, I can't handle it, and it shouldn't be happening. So if you have that, if you can, just take a deep breath. For me, this problem has opened me up to the biggest joy in life. Right. So it has been a massive opportunity, because if I had just got the appearance that I wanted, I would have probably carried on living in a very shallow way, which wouldn't have been satisfying. But when you don't get what you want, you are forced, well, you're not forced, but you get a strong push to look in a different direction, which you otherwise wouldn't do typically. So what if this could be an opportunity for you to discover more of yourself? Because you can't look for the solution in a toxic culture. And you have to be careful who you ask for advice for, because they might just tell you to get a tummy tuck. You need to go within. And when you go within, and by that I mean not just looking at your thinking, but exploring who are you beyond these habitual thoughts? Is there anything else? And you'll have to see. But for me, it's been like a wonderful discovery that only suffering would bring me to. Okay, and then the third quality, God, I move things along. The third quality is courage, right? So it can be difficult to be with feelings like disgust, sadness, anger, but that is what I would encourage you to do. So rather than trying to change that and go up into your head about the plan that you're going to make to change your body, or even worse than that, get out of your suffering, I would encourage you to see if you can be with your feelings. And by that, I don't mean just going round and round the thoughts, I'm so disgusting. I mean, can you bring your attention to the present moment and the feelings in your body? Because it's being in our heads that is causing the problem. And when we slow down and we're present with our experience and we show caring for ourselves, that's how healing actually happens. We bring love to the hurt places, and we're very gentle and patient, and we stop running, and we stop resisting and saying this shouldn't be happening, because what we resist persists, as you know. And we bring ourselves that attention that maybe we didn't have in the past, and that love, and that is what will shift everything. So you can use your feelings as a guide. So when we feel that strong disgust, hatred towards ourselves and the way we look, what I used to think was, because it's so strong, it means it's true, and it means I should pay attention to it. But what I know now is it means that I'm in a misunderstanding. And so that's helpful, because even if you still have the feelings, it kind of takes the edge off it a little bit, because you know that this temporary thought created experience, and that the thoughts that are creating it are very biased and negative, and they're not the whole story. So the way my healing worked was, let's say, look in the mirror, feel disgusted, but I'm aware that it's an experience, and I'm starting to take it less seriously. Whereas before, have that experience and I'm making a plan, I'm never going to eat again or whatever. And then over time, I took it less and less seriously. And then the thoughts stopped coming, essentially. I mean, now maybe those thoughts will come, but they have like no power. And I've got no interest in them. They're so boring, right? Because I was thinking these thoughts my whole life. I got so bored with them. When you're hurting, when you're feeling upset about the way you look, and you'd like to have a different experience, I sort of feel like it's almost two things that you can look at. And one is, look in the direction of truth. So be curious, ask questions. Where is this experience coming from? Is it coming from my body, or is it coming from my thoughts about my body? And I asked someone that recently, and they said, it's coming from my body, definitely. Wrong answer. It's not, it can't, it's not possible, right, to inject yourself with a feeling. It's coming from your consciousness, it's coming from within you. And then you project it onto what you see based on your conditioning. So that's looking in the direction of truth, is recognizing that your thoughts are coming from, your suffering's coming from your thoughts. Also, these things come in waves. So when it's really bad, you can also hold on to the fact that your mind will move on, even if it's brief, and then you won't be suffering because you'll be focused on something else. But as well, so that's the understanding piece. But then the other thing you need is the love. So it's love and understanding. So when you're suffering, when you're in misunderstanding, because you're buying into all these judgments and you're experiencing them, then you can ask yourself, what would be kind as I go through this? And one thing that isn't kind, which I can still do, is to just get caught up in the story and just to torture yourself with this very, very painful story. It can sound like not much fun to be with these difficult feelings, but actually it's beautiful. It can be beautiful. It can be tough, but I've just, lately I've been doing that more with, you know, when I have difficult things that come up, just to be with it more and be tender, patient, kind. We think it's not enough. That's all we need. But I want to finish before I stop talking. I'm sorry I've gone on so long, but I'm going to finish with a poem, just about poems. I only started writing poems after I healed from this. And if you're struggling with your body image, I just want to say there's so much you don't know about yourself, and so much to look forward to. That's really exciting. And it just started happening. because I was so weighed down before with this obsession that I didn't have room for anything, and all my creative expression was just kind of crushed. So it's been very joyful to for this to come out. Okay, so this poem is called Look at Me Too, because there was a number one that was a bit more depressing about how it used to be, but I thought I'll spare you that right now. And this is kind of how things are for me now. So I hope it will bring you some hope if you are suffering. Look at me. Don't I look wonderful? I don't look how you think I should. I don't look how I once thought I should. I look so much better than that. I look like me. My own shape, my own size, my unique body print, my signature smile radiating joy, because I've stopped wanting to look like anybody else, and I've stopped wanting to look like an idea of how a woman should look. I don't presume to know what nature deems right for my body. I'm less arrogant and afraid now, more humble and appreciative. I'm fully open to receiving. I sit alongside the same judgment that used to terrify me with peace and compassion. I know what it's like to find fault and feel constrained by rules and fear, to seek to tame, confine, restrict, and conceal, to cower in the shadows because I was scared to be seen, or to pose in the spotlight because I couldn't bear not to be, at a time when I mistook being evaluated for being valued. I'm not looking for your approval anymore. I have my own. So look at me or don't. Either way, I'm good. I already know my body belongs to life and that I am unconditionally, unfathomably beautiful, simply through virtue of breathing. I've dropped the filter of judgment and I can see myself clearly, as if for the first time. Care to join me? Your light burns brighter when seen through the lens of love. And from where I'm standing, you look absolutely gorgeous.